there are some incredibly obvious, like, tactical mistakes that players are making that if they literally just change one or two things, they would immediately be raising their game 1 or 2 levels.
Sandy, every week, paddle players are going down to their club, playing in a match, maybe even playing in a tournament, and they're losing matches based on the tactical decisions they're making. In this episode, we're going to go through tactical mistakes that all players should be avoiding.
Oh, this is huge as well. Like, we see this all the time down at the club. Before we do, we looked at our stats, didn't we, last week, and we saw that the majority of people are watching but not subscribed. If you would be able to subscribe, firstly, we'd be over the moon, but secondly, it would grow the international paddle community. It would allow us to work with more players and more players to get involved, and therefore we'd be able to help more people with their paddle game. So please subscribe and enjoy our conversation, which is going to be around tactics. And Tom, tactics is everything, isn't it, really? At the club level, whenever we do our clinics, I feel like tactics, starting with court position is huge. I think that if players got court position right, they would immediately be 1 or 2 levels better, wouldn't they? Like, that's always the first of the tactical mistakes, is court position.
Yeah, and I think it comes with the level you're playing at, doesn't it? Because a lot of players that I speak to around court positioning is their first focus is just trying to hit the ball. They're trying to hit the ball in the court. They know what the rules of paddle are, and they have an idea of what they're trying to do. They know the basic tactics of paddle, but they're struggling to know exactly where they should be standing, and as a result, they end up losing so many points and probably matches as a result.
Well, I think that if we went through like the journey, like the player journey, is like you get on court, you start experimenting with, oh, I can hit against my own glass, all right, if I lob them here, right, and you start to try and form your own little tactical thing and try and get an understanding of how the game works. And then as you get into the game, it's almost like you get wrapped up in what is happening in that point. And I think a big mistake that players make is they end up wandering into no man's land. Now, we call no man's land from the second post to the service line, and at high levels it's a transition zone where people can move forward or back, but at low level it's no man's land, that people just go in that zone and they stand there, and then the ball goes down by their feet or into the gaps, they lose the point, and then they're like, oh, I shouldn't have been in that zone. But I think the key is almost like being conscious of where you're moving on the court while you're playing. And it always reminds me, I think, and this is going to sound really bad, but beginner level in paddle reminds me of, like, my daughter is 5 now, and she's doing her first little football lessons, and they played a game last week, and it's like all the little group of 5-year-olds are just chasing this ball around the like, you could really not call it football. But
offside.
There was plenty of offsides going on and people kicking the wrong way, but I'm not saying that paddle players are like that, but it's almost like they're so wrapped up in following the ball that they're not thinking of the overall like court positioning and tactics and things like that. And so I think that when you play as a beginner, know that if you're at the back, you've got to stay in your back court position in your back zone. And when you get forward to net, you want to try and stay in your net position and your net zone without kind of blurring the two. And ideally, you're doing that as a pair. And I think that's the first major tactical error that we see, isn't it?
And the first element of this, I think, is almost awareness of that. I think a lot of players don't know that when you first start in paddle, that there are those two basic court positions. You're either at the net or you're at the back of the court. And I think that because a lot of players don't know that, I think that's why they end up drifting. I think that there's definitely a challenge of, once you do know the basic court position, then to make sure you're in that position. But I think the first step is just being aware, okay, these are the basic court positions I should be in, and not only for yourself, but for your partner as well. You need to be moving as a pair.
Yeah, and I think as you're saying that, I think I just want to call out a few people. Like, like not to embarrass anyone. Yeah, no names.
I've got a list. Get your list out.
Yeah, no names. But something I see a lot is this idea of, like, we as a pair hitting a lob and going in or get in or come, like me hitting the shot and telling you to come with me. And I think that loads of players do that. And when you speak to them about it, it's like, oh, well, I'm playing with them because I'm telling them to come in so that we move together as a pair, and maybe they don't understand the tactics or whatever that is. But we were breaking it down the other day, and it's like, first of all, you're telling your opponents where they are. Secondly, you're telling your partner what to do, even though they might not necessarily be comfortable doing it. Like, it's their game, it's how they feel. And thirdly, you might be telling them to do that on the wrong ball. Like, I saw loads of examples of that, come in, like telling their partner, and it was the wrong time to do it. And they both ended up not being able to make it far enough in, and they both got stuck. So if you are playing with a partner who is not coming in with you, and you hit lots of lobs and they're not coming, then that conversation is between points or between games, and you say, hey, look, when we hit the lob, let's try and come in. It's not shouting at them during the point. Like, there's almost no need to do that. If you're going to communicate on your opponent's position. And I think that almost moves us into the next step of tactics, with communication, really. And that's something that is very different from tennis, isn't it, in paddle?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that to have communication even part of tactical discussions. It's such a key part of tactics, is communication, and it's a real skill to learn, isn't it? I think that some players perhaps have a misconception that it's a mine or yours, and that's basically communication. But really, when you're not hitting the ball as a partner, you need to be so active like visually, but also active communication wise, telling your partner exactly where your opponents are, constantly being switched on. And I think a lot of players struggle with that. If they're not hitting the ball, they're aware of what's going on, but in a way they've kind of switched off a little bit unless they're hitting the ball. But communication is key, isn't it, tactically? Well,
it goes back to this analogy of focusing on the ball watching. Like, they're watching the ball, they're so like focused on this fuzzy yellow ball that's going across the court. They're not focusing on what their opponents are doing. And I think the other side of communication is, if we're playing together and I've been lobbed and I'm coming back to hit, is you telling me where they are so I can have an informed decision on my shot, but also me listening to you, which is another thing, which is something that players I hear players saying, oh, just stop talking, you're putting me off.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a different sport. This is not tennis. So it's like, this is a different sport. The communication is part of the game. The communication is there to help, because it's so easy and fast to move positions in paddle. It's very advantageous to have good communication and good skills in processing that information so I can choose the shot. And there's a big difference. Like, at the beginner level, you almost hear no communication, or there's lots of like, let's go, or mine and have it and all this, until you get up to like intermediate, high intermediate, and then advanced. Well, Premier and advanced is like, it's fluid conversation the whole way through a point. And it takes time for people to get that, I think.
And also I think that for players to understand that it is a skill, and that when you first learn it, you're not going to get it right. Recently, we were in a training camp that we held in Sardinia, and we were talking about communication, and it was a skill that a lot of the players, it would have been valuable for them to learn it. And at first, we were explaining to them that you might not always get it right. The most important thing is that you try to develop it and you communicate. Like, simply that process of communication is key at the start. Now, you might get it wrong. You might say that both players are up and maybe one is stay back, and that's okay. And I think that sometimes when players are learning the skill of communication, that they want to get it perfect right straight away, and when they don't, they almost shy away a little bit and think, well, it's almost better that I don't say anything if I'm not going to get it right. But that's actually the opposite, isn't it? It's a skill that you have to learn. You have to start somewhere. Like, even us, when we started, I remember communication being a difficult skill to learn, and you just have to get started, and you over time you will develop it.
And it's talking like as you process, right? As opposed to waiting for them, seeing where they're going to finally be, and then you tell your partner, because your partner then is almost having to change their mind just as they're hitting, and that's just not enough time. So it's almost like, communicate as early as you can, as fast as you can, and you'll get better at it. And I think that, moving into another tactical area is almost like the decision making that then has to happen, and patience within the point. And decision making, for most people, they think, oh, I should play to this side or this side, right? But actually it's more around like, how much risk am I going to take against my potential capability to hit that shot, right? If a lob goes up, if I'm going to go for a massive winner with my Vibra, like you've almost, and I'm not saying you need to calculate it like this, but you're saying, right, I've got a 90% success rate and I've got a very small chance of making the error, then go for it. But if you've got a big chance of, or even 50-50 of making an error versus winning the point, then maybe you play a more sensible option. And I think that this is something that the pros do incredibly well, is like the decision making and the reading of the game and the almost predicting of the probability of making the shots is so good. And I think that that's where everyone needs to kind of work on, all the way from beginner right the way up to that level, right?
So let's look at decision making for a beginner or a low intermediate player. So what would some of the decision makings for those players be? Because like you say, it's a lot of it is about capability and your own level. So we obviously see the pros on television and they're making very different decisions than, say, recreational, beginner, low intermediate players. So how would a player work on their decision making?
Well, I think it's the decision making for them is almost like the intention on the shot. Like if that lob goes up, you've almost got to analyze it to the point of like, okay, it's a short lob, I'm close to my opponent's net, I feel pretty good about hitting a smash and finishing the point, versus like a medium lob where you say, I could hit a smash here, but it could be bouncy and it could give my opponents an opportunity to come in, or I could try and play a bit more sensible with a cross court to give myself a better opportunity on the next one, versus a deeper lob, and going for it is a definite no-no, because either I'm going to definitely give them the net or I'm going to make a mistake. And it's almost doing that, and this is why it's so difficult when people say to us, oh well, what shot should I use in this scenario? And it's often like, it depends on your level, it depends who you're playing against, it depends what the conditions are, what you're feeling of probability to make that shot. And so it's a lot around like the intention versus, you know, do I have a high chance of success of succeeding in my intention, right? And I think that's almost the way to think about it, is like, only finish if you're sure you're going to finish. Like, only be aggressive if you know you can finish, and if not, be sensible. Like, play a more strategic shot and then think to yourself, right, I'll have a chance on the next one.
What happens if you feel like your decision making is correct, or you feel like you're working on it and you feel quite happy with your own decision making, but you're playing with a partner who perhaps you're playing an Americano, maybe you're playing with lots of different partners that don't quite have the same knowledge as you, they're not working on the same goals, and their decision making is off. How does that impact your own decision making? Is that something, again, a bit like communication, where you have a conversation with them in between points, or do you adapt your own decision making based on your partner?
It's so difficult, this, isn't it? It really depends on the level. And also, like, what I would almost counter that with is, how do you know your decision making is good? Like, how have you learnt it? Have you learnt it from a good coach or from good advice? Or are you there, and we see this a lot, as a pair, thinking my decision making is good, yet I'm the one who's just hit a big smash from behind the service line and they've taken the net and they hit the ball to my partner and he misses, but it's his fault, because it's not his fault, it's your fault for losing the net position and giving them the net. But it's one of those, it's like, and it's the same with technical skills. Understanding, what do you need to work on to be better technically? What do you need to work on to be better tactically, and understanding of the game? And if you're sure that you have good understanding and your partner doesn't have good understanding, then it's definitely a diplomatic conversation to, hey, let's try this tactic, or let's try doing this. There's no point in me telling you you're doing the wrong thing doing this. So all I'm going to do is lower your confidence or frustrate you in a match. So it's more like, right, why don't we try and do this, and let's us move here and do this and implement a new tactic rather than being critical, I think.
What are some of the ways that people can improve their tactical elements of their game? Because we talked about the different mistakes and we talked about decision making and how you can improve that, but how how can someone listening to this podcast think, okay, I know I need to improve my tactics. I'm losing matches because of my tactics. I know that. What are some of the things that they can go away and help them improve this more quickly?
Best case scenario is having a coach watch your match, right? Like recording your match, and either you sit down and watch it like you did in Sardinia. You did a match analysis with all the players there and you went through their matches like we do on our platform. We tell people where they're going wrong tactically within a point. You know, like that's the best way, right? It's an analysis of an actual game. Even if you play a match and I come to you as the coach, and you could be a great coach, and I give you my version of the events, it might be actually quite different to what happened. So match analysis is first. I mean, we've, like last week, did a webinar on match analysis, and actually it was one of our matches. But the next one, we're doing it on one of our members' games of, you know, their matches. And it's almost like going through and watching the game and seeing where you move and trying to paint a good picture of like what would good look like. And that's not necessarily Tapia and Cuello, but it's like what would good look like at this level. And then where am I, you know, where are the gaps between what that should look like and what I'm currently doing? And that then becomes my tactical focus.